Hey everybody, welcome back. We're in the garage with the half of the 28D, and we spent some time at Rudy's the last few days working on some mags, and I brought the governor housing and the fan shaft assembly over to Rudy's. Didn't bring my camera, but we completely disassembled the governor, completely disassembled the fan shaft, and started looking things over after I sandblasted and cleaned everything. I didn't sandblast the outside of the housing, but I'm going to sandblast the inside because there is a lot of rust and scale inside there. So that's what I did over there. I've currently got it all sitting up on my kitchen table laid out, and I'm going to kind of walk through all of the issues that we found with both the governor and the fan shaft. But as far as progress on the rear half, haven't done anything other than pull the covers off the top. That's all I've done. So we need to work on getting the flywheel off, the crankshaft out, the idler gear for the governor drive, camshaft, cam followers, and then we're going to work our way back. The clutch, I'm not sure about that at all because it is stuck. So, I mean, the crankshaft rotates a little bit, but I think the oil pump down below here is rusted up, stuck. So we got to have that out before anything's going to turn. And then we'll just work our way back. We'll start with, the first reduction gear and shaft, all the shifting shaft mechanisms. Work our way back here to the differential. Probably take the chains off before we start pulling any of this stuff apart. And I think it's just a master link with a pin and cotter key that holds the chain together. So once we get all this stuff out, then we can pull the axles off. And yeah, I did get the one axle nut off. Doesn't look too bad. But this one, I'm probably going to have to heat pretty well. The bolt is already, excuse me, the bolt is already loose, but I'm going to have to heat the nut, I think, to get this thing to turn. So I'm not sure how well that's going to go, but really, I don't really need to remove this wheel, but in order to move this thing, I think it'd be either beneficial to have both wheels on it and roll it outside with the rear axle still on and everything else out as far as the differential goes, or completely take everything off of it. So I don't know. It's not going to be easy to move either way, but we'll do the best we can. So anyways, let's head inside and I'll show you guys what we found with the governor and the fan shaft. Okay guys, we're back in the house now. I'm going to try and do this without waking up my daughter. Everything in the front here, with the exception of what's on the plate, and the only reason I have it on the plate is because these felts are pretty oily and I don't want to get this nice bath towel soaked with oil. So these are fan shaft components. So everything in the front here is governor components, and I'll kind of go through and explain each piece as we go along. So first and foremost, we have the governor drive gear. The gear itself looks great, nothing wrong with it. Everything's been blasted. It's can't really read the part number on it, but D something R. If I had my parts manual handy, I would be able to tell you. But The only thing that's wrong with this is the weights are a little bit loose. They're not terrible, but they are plenty loose enough to where we're going to grind the head off these pins, this one here and this one up here, and we're going to drive them out and install new oversized pins, which means we'll have to drill out the weight and the cast of the gear here. So not a huge deal. We'll take care of that. Moving on from there, we have the bevel gear for the fan shaft drive. So this gear goes on the back of the fan shaft, and then this gear goes on the governor shaft. Now, when these things are adjusted appropriately, the heel of the gear, which is this portion here, this beveled edge, should be flush. Now, my guess is, judging by the wear on the teeth of this gear, I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but inside, probably about, almost a 1/16 of an inch, there's a, you guys can hear that ting. That's my finger catching on a worn lip. That's, you guys can kind of see right here, that shiny spot. That's actually a piece of the gear that is unworn, that's this way, not with the gear. So that leads me to believe that this fan shaft gear was actually riding inset like this, not flush, because the wear pattern tells me that the gear was running inside the heel, because there's an extra bit of material here on the very outer edge of the teeth. And these are pretty significantly wore. I don't know if you can see that or not, but these shadows here, those are the shadows of the edge of that tooth that is really wore, and there's that lip on the edge. That shadow is from the lip. You can see this one even is starting to curl up a little bit. I'm trying to get it in the GoPro here. But regardless, this is a D500, this gear here, and I think this is a D501. So this would be your fan shaft pinion set. Now, this gear is okay. There's a little bit of pitting on it, but this gear seems to be okay. However, when you replace one of these, you should replace both, so that way they wear in together and you have a matching set. So we'll put this back with the fan shaft, and we'll set this one aside because it's pretty much junk. Both bearings, this one turns barely. This one doesn't turn at all, but they are a, what is it? New Departure 3303 with a shield. So these are shielded bearings, New Departure 3303. I'll have to cross-reference and see what we can come up with, but we should be able to find both these bearings, no problem. This is just a couple of keys. One's for the pinion gear, or I should say the fan shaft bevel gear, and one is for the governor drive gear. This is a spacer that goes behind the bevel gear. Then we have this plunger. Now this plunger goes through the back of the governor case. And I can't remember the orientation of offhand, but I'm going to say it's going like this. So this would be coming through the front of the governor case, and this would be riding on this here. Actually, there'd be a thrust bearing, which is back here. There'd be a thrust bearing here, I think. Or maybe the thrust bearing goes on this end. Either way, this finger would be riding on this collar or this flanged tube. It's a D59R, and as you work the throttle, it either pulls or pushes on this plunger that goes back into the governor case, which pushes on this or relaxes on it, which thereby pushes or relaxes on here. I think it actually goes like this. So got our thrust bearing like this. I'm trying to hold this all together. I should just assemble it so you guys can see. Let's try that. So essentially, we have the shaft, the tube, the thrust bearing, the finger, like this, okay? And then this is the pivot rod that goes down into the finger, which this is also severely worn. But Rudy was kind enough to provide a piece of tool stock. So we're gonna make a new piece with tool stock. We'll have to drill it for a cotter pin, and that will go through here and through the governor housing itself. But essentially, this is what we're looking at. So as you operate the throttle one way, it pushes the tube, which pushes against the governor weights, which closes the governor weights, which I believe would increase RPM. When you relax on the throttle, it allows the governor weights to spread out because the collar slides back. I could be backwards on this. I'm not even 100% sure if this is how it goes together, but this all seems to make sense to me. So yeah, I would think like on a tire swing, you pull your legs in, you spin faster, you throw your legs out, you spin slower. So as you relax, the plunger goes back into the governor housing, which allows this fork to move the fork teeth away from the tube, which allows the tube to slide out, which allows the weights to come out, which allows the engine RPM to drop. You pull the throttle forward or push it forward, it pulls the plunger out, pushes against or pulls the fork out, pushes against the thrust bearing, which pushes against the tube, which collapses the weights, which causes the engine RPM to rise. So this plunger is also severely worn. I'm not sure what we're going to do with this. We could probably make one, but I'm not sure what to do because this is the part that rides through the case and it's severely wore. So that's going to leak a lot of oil if we reuse it. But anyhow, another thing, we already talked about this shaft is wore. The teeth, or the backside of these forks that make contact with the thrust bearing here, these should have a lot more of a rounded edge on them. These are wore completely flat, if you guys can see that. This one even has a big lip on the edge here. If you can see that, this ridge right here. So this is pretty significantly wore. This is a D34R. So we're either going to need one of these to replace it, or we'll have to see if we can build this up with some braze. I don't think this is cast steel, so we won't be able to weld it. But we could braze here and here, and then round them down, or round them out. But it'd probably be just as easy to replace it with one that's good. The thrust bearing, if you can see that, there is a lot of pitting in this area. All the rollers, they're all pitted. And then this race is also pitted in this area. So the thrust bearing is pretty much junk. So all the bearings of the governor are junk. Now this piece here, this sliding tube, was actually rusted to the shaft. This whole assembly was just rust. So we were lucky enough that we could get it all apart. But we've got everything freed up, it slides nicely, the shaft is all polished. So the shaft is good. We don't have to worry about that, thankfully. So the shaft, the collar, the gear, these are all usable components. We'll make a new one of these, not worried about that. But we are going to have to find the governor fork, the plunger, a bevel gear, a pinion gear for the fan shaft, and all the bearings. So that's going to do it for this part of the governor. Let's talk about the fan shaft. Moving on to the fan shaft. We already talked about the pinion gear. It's probably usable, but like I said, you should replace both the bevel gear and the pinion gear together because they should wear together. Otherwise, you're going to risk making a whole lot of noise. These governors like to howl when they're either out of adjustment or when you use mismatched gear sets. So highly recommend you guys replace both the pinion and the bevel gear together. So that's what we're probably going to end up doing with this one. I think this is a D501, if I remember correctly. So we'll set that aside. The bearings are, let's see, this is a Hoover 303. I don't know if you can hear that. This one's pretty noisy. This one, pretty quiet, but it's pretty loose. So the inner race and outer race, they move around quite a bit. So we're going to have to find new bearings for the fan shaft. Speaking of fan shafts, this one cleaned up pretty good. This end is really nice. This end, somebody, it looks like they grabbed a hold of it with a pipe wrench here at some time. I don't know if they were trying to turn the engine over to, I don't know, to adjust timing, or if they were trying to free it up because it was stuck. I have no idea. But this area here, which is where the, let me think, this is where the bearing rides on the front end. Yeah, this is the front end where the fan is, and, or maybe, no, the bearing rides here. So this would then, this rides in, this is the bearing. So this would ride in the upper water pipe. This here. So some gouges, but not the end of the world. This, however, if you guys can see that, I know the lighting isn't very good, but there's hardly any threads left on there. There's some thread down at the bottom. There's a little bit of thread at the top, but in the middle, there's hardly anything left. So that's a problem, because this is what holds the fan on. We don't want this to loosen up, even though it has a cotter pin through it. We don't want this to loosen up and end up putting the fan into the radiator, because we have to replace the radiator core, and they are almost $500 for a radiator core, so we don't want to ruin that. So we'll either have to send this off to be machined and rethreaded. You know, they'll machine it down, weld it, rethread it, or turn it down on a lathe, rethread it, and then re-drill the hole, or we're going to have to find a replacement shaft. So the last pieces, this is the felt and seal carrier for the front of the fan shaft where it bolts onto the front of the water pipe. And I don't know if this is correct or incorrect, but to me it looks incorrect. This seal retainer cup, which is one of these, is installed, I believe, backwards. I'm not 100% positive, but to me it would seem to make sense to install it like this and not like this. That way you would prevent the seal from, you know, expanding and working its way out and everything else. And I don't know how I'm going to get this out without damaging it. I haven't gotten to that part yet, but this is the felt that goes inside here, and then this goes over the front of the fan shaft where it bolts to the water pipe. This is the rear carrier for the bearing and the seals, felt seals, which are here. And there's a front and a rear, or an inner and an outer, however you want to look at it. So this is your inner, this is your outer, and they get pressed in from the back side until they're seated in the front. And then your bearing seats in here. I've already got it in there crooked, but bearing seats in there. And of course I probably won't be able to get it out. There we go. And then what keeps everything in is this snap ring. Now, what concerns me is the groove that the snap ring goes into. If you guys can see the groove in there, right inside this edge, there's not much material left in some areas that's going to hold that snap ring in place. And that's concerning to me. So I'm thinking I might get another carrier. This is a D654R. I'm thinking I might get another carrier because I'm just not real confident on this snap ring groove. So that's where we're at with the fan shaft and governors assembly. So I'm not real confident on all this stuff. So, needless to say, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to this. Oh, we got the rear wheel off. That was the junk rear wheel. It had a really bad cracked rear hub, so we got that off. I need more jack stands. I've got 3 on the 27D out in the driveway, and then I'm holding this one up with cribbing and a floor jack, and it's, I need more jack stands. But anyhow, the block is ready to go to the machine shop. The crankshaft is at Crankshaft Supply in Minneapolis. The cylinder head is off at the machine shop already. And the camshaft is going to be shipped out to Barry Cam Service in Lester Prairie, Minnesota. So we're making progress on getting that stuff out to the machine shops. I don't know when we're going to see it. I told them no hurry on it because number one, we got to make the money to pay for it when it's done. And number two, I don't foresee this going back together until springtime at least. So that's where we're at. We're going to keep going with the teardown of the rear end here. And then once that's done, we'll kind of sequester all the parts from it, internal parts from it, and then we'll pull the 27 rear half in here, start tearing into that, looking at all the parts, and then we're going to pick the best pieces from both, assemble them, and new seals, new gaskets, bearings where needed, and start building a tractor. So that's the plan. I really don't have anything else for you at this point. Hopefully this weekend we can start tearing some more of this rear half apart. So anyways, that's all I've got. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Thanks for assessing with me, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.